A once-in-a-decade population census has shown that births in China have fallen to their lowest level since the 1960s, leading to calls for an end to birth control policies. But some in China say these policies aren't the only thing that's stopping them. Despite being hassled by her mum about it, Beijing resident Lily is not planning to have children anytime soon. The 31-year-old, who has been married for 2 years, wants to live my life without the constant worries of raising a child. I have very few peers who have children, and if they do, they're obsessed about getting the best nanny or enrolling the kids in the best schools. Sounds exhausting. China's census, released earlier this month, showed that around 12 million babies were born last year, a significant decrease from the 18 million in 2016, and the lowest number of births recorded since the 1960s. The co-pilot of the ill-fated flight that crashed in Nepal on Sunday lost her husband in a plane crash 16 years earlier, it has emerged. Anju Katawada was co-piloting Yeti Airlines Flight 691 when it smashed into a gorge near the tourist town of Pokhara, killing all on board in the country's worst air disaster in 30 years. Her husband Deepak Pokhrel had also been co-piloting a Yeti Airlines flight when he died, and it was his death that spurred Anju to pursue a career in aviation. Distraught at her loss, alone with their young child, Anju's grief became her motivating force. She was a determined woman who stood for her dreams and fulfilled the dreams of her husband, family member Santosh Sharma said. Deepak was in the cockpit of a Twin Otter prop plane which was carrying rice and food to the western town of Jumla when it came down and burst into flames in June 2006, killing all 9 people on board. 4 years later, Anju was on the path to becoming a pilot, overcoming many obstacles to train in the U.S. Once qualified, she joined Yeti Airlines. In the hours after Nepal's deadliest plane crash for 30 years, a video went viral in India. It showed one of the victims, Sonu Jaiswal, live streaming from the plane just seconds before the crash. He was part of a group of 4 friends from Gazipur in India who were visiting Nepal, and were on the flight from Kathmandu to Pokhara. In the footage, Pokhara airport's surroundings are visible from the doomed plane as it comes into land, those on board unaware they are just moments from death. Within seconds, huge flames and smoke fill the screen as the camera keeps recording. What sounds like the screeching of an engine is audible, as well as breaking glass and then screams before the video ends. Friends and family members of Sonu Jaiswal told reporters that they had watched the video on his Facebook account, confirming its authenticity. China's economy grew last year at the second slowest rate in almost half a century, in a sign of how the country's strict coronavirus regulations have affected businesses. Official figures show the gross domestic product, GDP, of the world's second-largest economy rose 3% in 2022. That is way below the government's target of 5.5% but better than most economists had forecast. Last month, Beijing abruptly lifted its strict zero-COVID policy. The policy had a major impact on the country's economic activity last year, but the sudden relaxation of the rules has led to a jump in COVID cases that threatens to also drag on growth in the early part of this year. Other than at the start of the pandemic in 2020, when full-year GDP expanded by 2.2%, last year's economic growth was the weakest since 1976, when the founder of the People's Republic of China, Chairman Mao Zedong, died. The massive volcanic blast in the Pacific last year was felt 18,000 kilometers away on the other side of the world, on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. The cataclysmic eruption of Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai on the 15th of January 2022 sent pressure waves through Earth's atmosphere that connected with the sea surface and triggered 50 highly sensitive seismometers placed 5,000 meters below on the seabed. It was one of a number of intriguing phenomena picked up by the instrument network in the Azores, Madeira, Canary Islands region. Scientists, led from University College London, had set up the stations primarily to detect earthquakes. Is to use the signals from ground motions to image the interior of the planet, to trace the great upwellings of magma of the type that built the islands of the Portuguese and Spanish archipelagos. It was an innocuous-looking photograph that turned out to be the downfall of Zheng Zhaoqing, a former employee with energy conglomerate General Electric Power. According to a Department of Justice (DOJ) indictment, the U.S. citizen hid confidential files stolen from his employers in the binary code of a digital photograph of a sunset, which Mr. Zheng then mailed to himself. It was a technique called steganography, a means of hiding a data file within the code of another data file. Mr. Zheng utilized it on multiple occasions to take sensitive files from GE. GE is a multinational conglomerate known for its work in the healthcare, energy and aerospace sectors, making everything from refrigerators to aircraft engines. The information Zheng stole was related to the design and manufacture of gas and steam turbines, including turbine blades and turbine seals. Considered to be worth millions, it was sent to his accomplice in China. It ultimately benefit the Chinese government, as well as China-based companies and universities. When you arrive in China now, the officials in head-to-toe protective clothing are gone. There are no buses with special plastic dividers waiting to take you to centralized quarantine. The main reminder that COVID is still around is that people are wearing masks. It feels weird. You still need a PCR test before flying, and arriving passengers fill in a health declaration form, accessible via phone apps. This then generates a temporary QR code. You scan the code when you come through the airport and then, after clearing immigration, simply walk out and into China. As a journalist, I had to wait for an hour for special clearance to enter. During that time, I and another waiting reporter had a long chat with one of the immigration police. It was the first day they didn't have to wear the Da-Bai, big white, protective gear over their uniforms or face shields or shoe covers. Was it a relief? Halfway through his speech at the 1963, gospel singer Mahalia Jackson shouted, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." The call-out prompted King to pivot to a previous sermon he delivered, where he described a version of the American dream that was equal and accessible to all citizens. "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today," Dr. King said. The iconic moment would later become known as the "I Have a Dream" speech. And there is still work to be done to truly live up to Dr. King's dream of equality, said Lerone Martin. His dream of equality is quintessentially American, said Lerone Martin, director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Institute at Stanford University. Tesla has cut the price of some of its most popular electric cars by thousands of pounds in Europe and the US, in a bid to boost customer demand. The firm faces a difficult global economic outlook and increased competition from other carmakers. The price cuts are in the range of 10% to 13% in the UK, but run as high as 20% on some US models. New UK buyers will save £5,500 on an entry-level Model 3 and £7,000 on the cheapest Model Y. However, more than 16,000 customers bought those best-selling models last year, and some were angry that they had paid more. One posted on a Facebook group for Tesla owners, "I just picked up the car yesterday. What should I do? Go to Tesla and give back the car? I can't believe after a few hours from picking up the car I lost £5,000. Cryptocurrency firms Gemini and Genesis have been charged by U.S. regulators with illegally selling crypto assets to hundreds of thousands of investors. The companies are accused of breaking the law by offering and selling the products through their joint program, Gemini Earn, which launched in 2021. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, is in charge of the case. Gary Gensler, who chairs the SEC, said, "Today's charges build on previous actions to make clear to the marketplace and the investing public that crypto lending platforms and other intermediaries need to comply with our time-tested securities laws. Doing so best protects investors. It promotes trust in markets. It's not optional." Over the past week, a public feud has erupted between the Winklevoss brothers and Barry Silbert, the chief executive of Digital Currency Group, the parent company of Genesis. The UK economy unexpectedly grew in November, helped by a boost from the World Cup, official figures show. The economy expanded by 0.1%, helped by demand for services in the tech sector and in spite of households being squeezed by rising prices. The Office for National Statistics, ONS, said pubs and restaurants also boosted growth as people went out to watch the football. But it is still unclear whether soaring costs will tip the UK into recession. Although the November reading of gross domestic product, a measure of all the activity by businesses, the government and people in the UK, was much better than anticipated, the overall picture still suggests the economy is stagnating as food and energy bills go up and people cut back. Apple chief executive Tim Cook will see his annual pay package slashed by more than 40% this year. The technology giant says Mr. Cook requested the cut after criticism from shareholders. Apple's compensation committee awarded him a total target compensation of $49 million, £45.1 million, for 2023. Last year, the iPhone maker's shares fell sharply in the face of supply chain issues and a global economic slowdown. The compensation committee balanced shareholder feedback, Apple's exceptional performance, and a recommendation from Mr. Cook to adjust his compensation in light of the feedback received, Apple said in a filing with a U.S. financial watchdog. Argentina saw prices almost double last year as the country's annual inflation rate hit its highest level in more than 30 years. Official figures show consumer prices jumped by 94.8% in the 12 months to the end of December. It marks the South American country's fastest pace of inflation since 1991. Last year, Argentina's central bank raised its main rate of interest to 75% as it tries to rein in the soaring cost of living. On a monthly basis, Argentina's monthly inflation rate stood at 5.1% in December. The monthly figure marks a small victory for the government of President Fernandez as the country's official inflation rate remains below the peak of 7.4% in July. Adidas has lost a court case to try to stop a fashion designer from using a four-stripe design. The sportswear giant argued that luxury brand Thom Browne Inc.'s four stripes were too similar to its three stripes. Brown argued that shoppers were unlikely to confuse the two brands as, among other reasons, his had a different number of stripes. Adidas had planned to ask for more than $7.8 million, £6.4 million, in damages, but a jury in New York sided with Brown. Brown's designs often feature four horizontal, parallel stripes, encircling the arm of a garment or, as frequently seen on the creator himself. The U.S. helped spark a global surge in the cost of living. Now that the country's price inflation shows signs of easing, does it point the way for the rest of the world? The U.S. was the first major economy where inflation took root, as a wave of pandemic relief money from the government set off a boom in activity and spending. The increases soon spread overseas, as strong demand from American buyers pushed up the cost of oil and other essentials. Global shipping firms raised fees, and companies faced with shortages hiked prices. Then, when the U.S. central bank started raising interest rates to fight the problem, it triggered a rush of money into the country, sending the dollar to its strongest level in 2 decades, and raising costs in other countries even more.